Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Most Ashtanga Yoga practitioners around the world don't have a direct experience of what it's like to be a visible minority in the Ashtanga Yoga space. And so today we are talking about some really important issues with our beautiful guest, Shakira Boer. She's a vibrant Ashtanga Yoga teacher authorized in Mysore, India, who grew up in Jamaica and is now living in South Africa. Shakira brings such a deeply personal and essential perspective to this really important conversation that we're having. We're exploring some themes around what it means to be seen and often unseen in a practice that frequently favors able-bodied or privileged practitioners, and the importance of having clear expectations and accessible standards within traditional lineages, and also how sometimes those expectations and standards can unintentionally exclude populations. Shakira's journey negotiating identity, belonging, and leadership inside the Ashtanga Yoga tradition, where often there were many unspoken norms that were not questioned, is really insightful and deeply motivating. We're looking at the broader systemic dynamics, financial, physical, and cultural barriers that often keep many from truly entering the Ashtanga Yoga spaces. Shakira is challenging the status quo with a beautiful invitation to reflect on how yoga can evolve from a culture that is borderline exclusive to one of radical inclusion without losing the essence of the discipline, devotion, dedication to the practice. If you've ever felt like you didn't quite fit in on the mat, or you're a teacher wrestling with these deeper, more challenging questions of lineage, identity, inclusion, or maybe you're simply curious about this conversation, then I hope that this episode offers you a sense of clarity, a deeper compassion, and that you're able to take away some actionable insights that you can put into practice. Because really, at the heart of it, that's what it's all about. Getting messy, not being afraid to make mistakes, and putting into practice our values, what we believe to be right and true and good. So let's get into this conversation. I cannot wait to share all of the beautiful blessings of it with you.
You were going to make an introduction for the folks at home. Who are you?
I'm Harmony, and this is the Finding Harmony podcast. And I'm here with Russell Case.
Oh, good morning, everyone.
And Kira Boer.
Boer.
Did I do it?
It's Shakira.
Boer.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Shakira Boer. You can call me Kira. You can call me Shax. Please feel free.
I like Shax.
Yeah.
I was so excited to get on the show with Shax because she was just about to talk about me, which is my favorite subject.
Yay!
I wonder if you would continue.
Sure.
That was so nice. So, I was teased by it.
I will never, ever forget. This was like how I came to know who you were because I'd heard you start practicing. And I'm what I consider myself to be a journeyman Ashtangi, right? Just kind of like you have your character actors and your bit part people, and you have your stars. And I'm definitely not a star. I'm a star to myself and to my husband, and that's it. And I love that. But I'd known of your name, and then like I think at that time too, Russell, you had a couple of videos on YouTube, and I was looking for anything I could find that I could just kind of follow in how you practice this and how you do that. Because in Jamaica, I was just practicing alone. So when I went to Mysore, this must have been trip number 1 or trip number 2, so 2012 or 2013, and we were practicing late that morning. It was one of those days when I had like an 8 o'clock time that I had gotten, and I remember Zoe was helping me out, and in front of me was Russell practicing, and Russell was working on Galavasana in third. And I was just like, I think I had finished doing back bends, and she had helped me get closer to catching. I was nowhere close to catching on that trip. And so I sat down, and she'd kind of bent me forward to smush. And in front of me there now is a leg sticking up in the air, and that's Russell in Galavasana. And I was just like, this is just madness. What is this? And then Sharat came off the stage, and this could have been maybe about 8 or 9 of us left in the shala at a time. And it was just, I love the movements like that, where he didn't have to be teacher in that moment. He could just be more playful. And he came off the stage, and he got down and was like, no, Russell, do this. And he went up into it and just flew up into it. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And then I just gathered up my stuff and went into the changing room to collapse into a puddle of sweat. But I remember seeing you there. And then, so that would have been about 2013. And then Harmony, I think I saw, because in 2014 now, this was the year
I just want to interrupt. I just want to say that the part that you reminded me of was the giggling and fun that we were having.
It was just fun.
And that I'd been assisting him in the morning, and so that's why I was so late. And we were like really the only ones left.
Right.
And it was just a really kind of light, easy feeling in the room, and not all the pressure that you get at 4:30 in the morning where people are quite intense.
Yes.
And he comes off the stage and he shows me how to do it, and I noticed that he was wearing a long sleeve shirt.
Yep.
I said, "Oh, that's how you do it."
That could be those sweats.
Yeah. So I go and I say, "I'll go," and I said to Sharat, "I'll go get my shirt." And I ran off into the changing room, and I got my shirt, and I came out, and he said, "No shirt for you." I said, "Oh, no.
Rats, foiled again.
And everybody just broke up in the room laughing, and it was really nice.
I know the Zoe it was.
Yes.
It was Zoe who lives in Virginia.
Correct. With all the tattoos, curly hair Zoe.
Yeah, all the curly hair.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. And she and I had a giggle about it. It was just lovely. And for me, because Mysore had seemed so intimidating, and as you said, use the right word, intense, this was this really lovely moment where it wasn't that deep. It was just Sharaji being playful and not taking, in a group of people, in a group of 80 people or 100 people in a room, he has to be authoritative. But here he is one-on-one with you. And that's what I've always experienced with him. And those are the things I get to carry with me. Those are the pictures that I get to carry, is how kind he was in those one-on-one kind of moments that I really loved. And it's those things that we have, those memories, the pictures that we can take with us. Collect all the pictures that you can collect to go on. And so now that Sharaji isn't here, then those are the pictures I want to take on.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because I want to hear what you had to say about meeting Harmony, but just to reflect on that, is that, especially when someone passes, and maybe when they've passed, maybe you're in the middle of a fight and the middle of an argument that you've been having, and then you didn't get a chance to resolve that. And you kind of leaves you a little bit on your back foot, and there's a lot of conflicted feelings.
Of course.
But it's really lovely to be reminded of a really sweet, funny, intimate moment that we had, and we had loads of those, because I'd hosted him many times, and I'd taken him on vacation to Vegas many times, and there were lots of lovely times. And
those are the pictures you get to take.
But they kind of get coupled with some of the difficult experiences you have as well.
I think there is something that is very powerful about that. And what I want to say is, it's like, if you've ever read Khalil Gibran's book, The Prophet, and he talks about, so it's my favorite book. It's a book I read it to students at the end of a class. And one of my favorite things is joy and sorrow. The more sorrow that you have is the more joy that your heart can then contain. And every time that you laugh, it has been for something that you mourned. And every time that you mourn, it is for something that has been your delight. And I think that is you can't have one without the other. These things come together. You appreciate the hard moments allow you to come to a place where this wasn't comfortable and I had to deal with this. And maybe it's an uncomfortable moment with my teacher, or maybe it's an uncomfortable moment with the community, because goodness, we have those. And maybe it's an uncomfortable moment globally. And maybe it's an uncomfortable moment in terms of how we view things and how we talk about politics or how we talk about the difficult topics. But those things also help us understand joys and the lighter moments. Those add to those pictures, Russell. To me, I think I've come to a place in my life that I think peacefully, I can't have peace without understanding to move through the difficulty. And it's like asana, because if you're dealing with a pose that's difficult, I spent 3 years on Kapotasana, okay? And I hated it, and I hated it, and I hated it. And finally, on my last, which was my final trip with Sharat, trip home to Mysore 7 years ago, he was like, okay, next pose. And I was like, thank the Lord. Oh, it was great. But you had to have that. I had to have that struggle to get to the appreciation and the gratitude on the other side. And so I feel like, it's uncomfortable in the moment, and you feel a way, as Jamaicans would say, you feel uncomfortable or you feel cute about it, but there is a beauty to the other side. And there's an importance to finding the balance between the difficulty, because that's necessary, and even the animosity in moments, because there is that too, and hoping that we can get to the other side of that as well.
Amazing.
Lovely.
We should just end the podcast here.
Okay, bye.
Quick. We have a lot we want to get to know. Maybe you could just go back and
Can I tell you how I met Harmony?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was in 2014, because I remember this. It was weird for me to be practicing, because I'm 5'10". A meter.
Are you tall?
Oh yeah, I remember seeing you.
I'm a tall person, so there was no way I was going to be practicing at the front. But as it so happened that morning, because by this point now, I think Sharat began to notice my face and knew who I was, and now he pushed me forward earlier, and now I was practicing at the front with you and David, who's Canadian but originally from Trinidad, because I was so excited to see another West Indian. And the two of you practice right at the front, right in front of Sharat's office, because y'all are short. And I'm right behind. And I remember being like, what am I doing here? I'm obviously so much taller. And I think we kind of had a giggle about it. And then there was a day we had lead class, and there was a cockroach that flew into the shala. And all of us at the front, me, you, David, and ran around. We were just like, okay, no. And then Sharat comes over and he kind of scoops up the cockroach. Never me. It could never be me. And takes the cockroach out, and our faces after that. And then we giggled and we just got on with practice. And that's how I remember meeting you.
Where I grew up in Louisiana, those are quite tasty.
Like palmetto bugs?
We put them in our... Yeah, you put them in your gumbo.
You're not funny.
You're
not funny, Russell.
I think the first time I ever saw a cockroach was when I moved to Thailand in 2004.
The first time?
Yeah, because we don't have cockroaches in Canada. It's
a bit too cold here. And yet there's a sizable Jamaican community in Canada.
There is. So that's a fun thing about Jamaica and West Indians. So I've been living here 3 years now, and almost 2 weeks ago, I did a book club with my group of book club ladies on West Indian literature, Caribbean literature. And something to share is that largely Caribbean diasporas are often end up being larger than the population of the island itself. So I would say between the US and Canada and the UK and parts of continental Europe, and maybe 3 of us in South Africa, the Jamaican diaspora is larger than the population of Jamaica. There's 3 million people that identify as Jamaica living outside of Jamaica, and 2.8 million living in the island.
Yeah, it's a lot of similar examples, right? There's 5 million Norwegians living in North America, but there's only 3 million in Norway. Yeah, Chicago is the largest Polish city on earth.
Right. Whoa. Excuse me? Chicago? As opposed to Warsaw or Krakow or...
Yeah. It may be the same size as Warshava. I want to ask you, though, about the word diaspora. I'm interested in it. I also often hear about the Han diaspora, about the Koreans who've fled to Los Angeles. Did something happen in Jamaica that people fled? Because I feel like the word seems to suggest the Jews fleeing Israel, like you have to flee something.
Right.
Is it something like that?
Jamaica was a unique sort of holding for the UK, colony, for lack of a better word, up until 1958. Up until 1958, Jamaica was sort of the jewel in the crown for the UK in terms of sugar, in terms of cocoa, what is used to make chocolate, is cacao, bananas, coffee, and then also more recently bauxite, which is the thing for alumina, which is the thing for aluminium, right? The source product. I think when Jamaica, so there was just like you have the European Union today, there was this attempt at something called the Federation in the Caribbean during the late 1950s. And at that time, Jamaica decided they don't want to be responsible for whatever reason, issues of sovereignty, issues of big island attitude towards small island attitude. They didn't want to be responsible. The Jamaican government didn't want to be responsible for other countries. At the time, they, I think, were responsible for what was called British Honduras at the time, which is Belize today. The Turks and Caicos, I might be wrong about that one, but they were absolutely for sure responsible for the Cayman Islands as well. And Jamaica was sort of like, we don't want to have to be responsible for being the big dog and the heavy lifter in that group. And so they broke away from this attempt at federation. Around this time, there was obviously the rumblings of the end of British colonization in the Caribbean. Countries were wanting to break away. This was going to be that step towards that ultimate independence. And so Jamaica struck off between 1960 and 1961. And so we attained independence on August the 6th, 1962. And I think a whole bunch of people were panicking and didn't want to leave the UK. And so there was a lot of what we call, there's actually a poem done by one of our poet laureates called Colonization in Reverse. So because it was like a musing as to, now you spent all your time sending your values here, and now it's a whole bunch of people going there. So if you've heard about the Windrush and the boats that went across to the UK, there had been, so parts of the Jamaican diaspora would have been soldiers who would have gone to the UK to fight World War I, right? That kind of thing. Even before that, the diaspora was growing. My grandmother, who was born in 1919, was born in Panama to Jamaican parents because Jamaicans went to Panama to be part of the building of the Panama Canal. So the diaspora was less about running away from a bad situation per se, but I suspect more about running in its economic migration, as opposed to a kind of like, this is a bad situation. Here we are dealing with civil war or dealing with a coup or dealing with that kind of situation and people wanting to run from that.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Freedom to versus freedom from.
Freedom to.
I like that.
Okay,
I like that.
Okay. And you sounded less like a yoga teacher and more like United Nations. You sound like you had a previous life.
I did.
What did you do?
What I do?
What went wrong that you ended up in my
What went right? How did I get here? I took my very first yoga class in 1999. Before the turn of the centuries, because we can age ourselves, we can lean into our age. I'm fine with that, darn it. And I was struggling to sleep at night, and I would get up early in the morning, and I would go to work, and I'd be at work at 7:00 in the morning, and I was working at one of the big 4 accounting firms at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I'd gotten that job straight out of university. I hadn't even studied anything business related. I had just been really good at helping around and learning things and absorbing things. I had studied zoology and organic chemistry at university, and I didn't want to go into medicine, and I didn't want to follow the path my father had laid out for me and said, you're going to do this. I was like, I think I'd rather work. Maybe I'll do that instead. And I went to work. And so I was working, and I'd get home in the evening. You'd struggle through 2 hours of Kingston traffic to get home, because I lived in what's called Uptown Kingston, and the office was in downtown, right by the harbor. If you've ever been to Jamaica, you've been to Kingston Harbor. It's one of the largest natural harbors in the world, and you have to drive quite a way to get there. Jamaica is like this. It's very tiny, but it's very mountainous, and so because of that, everything is almost all the roads are very windy. So something that might be a kilometer or two might take a lot longer than you'd think to get there. So I'd come home in the evenings and I would struggle to fall asleep at night, and I would have to try to turn off the brain, and the brain was doing this, and the brain was doing this, and the brain was doing this. And it was all the things I had done wrong that day. And it was, we always hold on to the negative, and I was holding on to the negative, and all the things I had done wrong that day, all the things I had slipped up, all the things I could, and I have an eidetic memory. So even worse, I was going back into my photographic memory and like going back and picking up things, holding on to things that the person that probably was mad at me in the moment had long forgotten, but I was still holding on to it. And so I would struggle to sleep at night. So I was working out at the gym, and then there was a lady saying they're offering yoga classes. And I was like, ooh, let's do yoga. I'd like to bend up my legs, my stiff body into these funny shapes. Let's see. And I remember thinking, this is going to be great. And it was so hard. And she made us do Bakasana on the first class. And I was like, what on earth is this? But what was more important was that I laid out on that mat at the end, completely spent. And the next thing I knew, somebody was touching me on my shoulder and saying, Shakira, Shakira. And I had fallen asleep without realizing I'd fallen asleep. And I was like, ha, this is what I need. And so that is what literally pulled me into it. And so at the time, there weren't that many yoga studios in Jamaica at all. And for a couple of reasons, the chief of which I think was because Jamaica leans so heavily Christian and conservatively Christian, there was very much a discomfort with yoga, what yoga means, asana practice, anything to do with meditation, anything to do with anything that took you away from the good book was seen as something that was a problem. So I remember even seeing, like, by the time I found a yoga studio, there had been articles in the paper about how people are protesting outside the yoga studio and that kind of thing. And this was in 1999, 2000. This isn't like in the 70s. This is recent. And I feel like for me at the time, I was a religious believer, but I still was just like, but there must be something valuable to this. And if God is a loving God, right, why would he allow us to have access to this thing if we're not meant to use it? It's a tool. What if we just use it as a tool? And I had that thought from back then. And so I started taking yoga classes, and that would have been 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I was doing a whole bunch of different kinds of asana practice. I had done a little bit of Iyengar, a little bit of Anusara. I had done like your regular type of Hatha flow class, power vinyasa, which I absolutely loved. And I needed that because I needed to be physically drained by the end of my practice in order to get out of my head, because otherwise the hamster wheel was going to continue. And so I kind of was just like, this is really amazing. I want to deepen my study. And I took like this 40-hour yoga teacher training with a Iyengar base, and I really enjoyed it. And it allowed me the ability to then go ahead and start teaching. And so I started doing that in 2007. And I was like supporting my work with this like 1 class a week or 2 classes a week. And it was great. And that was around 2007, 2008. I went and did a master's degree. I went and did an MBA. And then I went and changed my job. Now I had lived in France for a while before all of that, in between all of that. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. And then moved back to Jamaica, and I was definitely different, and my attitude towards work had changed. I felt almost like I wasn't doing the right thing for myself. And so now I couldn't do it anymore to the best of my ability. Before you can't unknow what you know, and I had traveled a little bit, and I think I now was seeing the world in a wider way. I'd gone to Italy and Belgium and Spain and kind of seen a little bit more and been like, whoa, there's a lot more to this. And what I know now is that there's a sort of continuum. Forget morality. We assume morality, that we're not killing people and we're not trying to hurt people and that kind of thing. But there's a spectrum between the people who can do any job as long as it pays them a salary, and the people who need to love what they do. And I realized now I was more in this camp than I was in that one, because now that I didn't want to do something, I moved on to another job, another corporate job, which was my last one. And now this one, they held up the mirror because now I wasn't doing well. I wasn't performing well. and I was struggling, and they put me on, like, they were trying to get me to shift and do different kinds of things, and they put me on a performance improvement plan, which is like when you hear you have to go on a PIP, it's the worst thing in the world, and it's a hit to your ego. And I'm not a dumb person, but I just didn't want to be there, and I didn't have the language for what that meant anymore. And I remember at that time too, I was teaching a yoga class for my job every Tuesday evening at 6:30, because they had one of the things about this place. It was an investment bank, but they were very big on family. So, for example, they had a creche they had a creche for people anywhere from 3 months all the way up to 15 years old. You could send your children there and they could stay there. We had like free lunch, a whole bunch of great benefits, and including was like yoga classes and fitness classes for free. So I was the yoga instructor, which was awesome. And then I remember not my boss, but my grand boss coming to my yoga class, and she loved it. And she said to me, if you could be as good a project manager as you are a yoga teacher, you would have this job down pat. And I think what she meant was apply the yoga stuff to doing your job here. And what I now know is that I needed to leave and become a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
I get it now. I'm thankful because, but it was painful to go through that to get there.
It's amazing that your grand boss had the confidence to say that to you, because you apply this to the work, but really you had made a choice about dharma. And the Dharma was going this direction.
Yeah, and I couldn't stop it anymore. I really could not stop it anymore. I didn't have the fight in me to try. I remember saying about the job before they put me on a different job, I was like, I hate this. I hate what I'm doing. And if you're doing that, you shouldn't be there. You know what I mean? And they were lovely people. And I was terrified because in a country like Jamaica, where a small, relatively homogenous population, culturally homogenous, if not racially, you say you're going to become a yoga teacher? Excuse you? It's like, I remember, and if I had $1 for every person who asked me, what's going on with that yoga thing? As if it was this little side hobby that you had and it wasn't something to be taken seriously. And I remember like comments, particularly from men, that I would get about almost belittling what I did and wondering what the men in my life thought about this choice I had made, as if I was not an adult capable of making her own choices. And I remember thinking, I need to do something, I need to leap. And so in 2011, I remember it was the year I signed up to do like a month-long 200-hour Ashtanga. There was a lady, and I don't want to slag anybody off, but it was a story. Let me just get into that. So here was a lady doing a yoga 1 month, 200-hour Ashtanga-based yoga retreat in Jamaica, right at about the time that I had left my corporate job. And I was like, this is serendipitous. This is a moment. I'm going to do it. And I wrote to her and I was so excited. And she was like, okay. And she says, would you like to do work trade? And I was like, absolutely. So if I can do work trade, it's going to be cheaper and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then I ended up teaching
half the class
for a month.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's really jumping into the deep end.
That's jumping. And so
what great training.
Exactly. And so how we did it. So Jamaica sort of looks like the shape of my hand, right? Here is Kingston. This is about the shape. This is about that sort of shape. Here's Kingston in the southeast. And in the southwest is the beautiful, sleepy fishing village of Negril, right? So if you've ever heard of Negril, right? So she organized us to come down to Negril. We're going to spend a month in Negril. My father's from Negril, so I was in my home territory. I was like, this is great, no problem. And you would have Mysore practice early in the morning. Then she would teach us the postures and the adjustments. And then we would do a couple of hours of anatomy, we would do chanting. We would do chanting of the Yoga Sutras. And then I think we did try to start the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, but I'm not sure. I think it was just the Yoga Sutras that we chanted. And then in the evening, we would do, which I loved, a yin practice to sort of balance off the morning intensity. And I remember getting what I now know is a cam deformity in my left hip. So my left hip was never going to open in Baddha Konasana the way that my right hip does. My right leg just goes all the way down naturally. Here she comes over and she gives me, that was my adjustment. And I was like, oh my God. And I remember sitting there, she's just ripped my left hip open and I'm going to cry. Don't cry, Shakira, don't cry. So learning about...
Oh, that's a Bob Marley song, Shakira.
No Woman, No Cry. You're funny. And I remember she would teach the adjustments and then she would be like, when you finished, you teach the adjustments and whatever you add. So for example, if she taught the adjustments up to Trikonasana B, then I would teach that and then I would go to her hotel room and then knock on her door and then she would come and do Parsvakonasana all the way up to, let's say, Prasarita, right? And then the next day, and then she'd go back to her room and then the next day and then the next day. And so basically it ended up me doing and teaching other people how to teach. And I'm just like, what on earth am I doing here? What is this? Now, I had started studying with another teacher from before whom I'd go to study with. And I asked them, do you know this person? Yeah, we know her from Mysore. And I was like, okay, cool.
Oh my goodness.
No problem. Again, this is one of those times where I don't want to call names just because, right?
We'll ask you after.
Yeah, ask me afterwards and I'll tell you. and she was just not right. And okay, there was one lady who came there. This story it gets wild. So other than that she was so uninterested, she just didn't care. Maybe it was a cash grab because nobody else was doing it. And we were paying, there was about 20 of us and we were paying in around the region of anywhere between, I think the cheapest for 2 weeks was like 2,500 US. And the most expensive would have been around 4,004. And that depended on whether or not you were single occupancy, double occupancy, triple occupancy, that kind of thing. And so there's a whole bunch of us. Some of us still talk to this day. And she was so strange. She just was not into, we tried to get joy out of her, not interested. Anyway, at the end of this, everybody went back their separate ways, and there was a girl who had come, and she was French. Now I speak French because I'd lived in France. And Sylvie I can call Sylvie's name because I don't think she would mind. Sylvie was like, something is weird. I don't like the feeling. She spent a week and then she left and she wanted a refund because she had paid for a month and she'd only spent a week. So she wanted her 3 weeks back. And so she messaged on Facebook, could you please give me back my money? And I was like, ooh, maybe this is a cultural thing. Wow. So I reached out to her and I was just like in French, on fait pas comme ça. Maybe we should, and she was like, Shakira, something isn't right with this teacher. Reach out to her and ask her if something is, if she's answering you honestly, because she's dodging me and she's saying some really strange things. So I reached out to her. I had no intentions of ever studying this woman again, but I wanted to hear, I was trying to see if I could help out. And I reached out to her and I said, I'm really curious about another program with you. I'm glad I did the learning. I got my 200-hour certificate. At the time, I was supporting Yoga Alliance and I could get my continuing hours and blah, blah, blah. And I was excited about it. And she went off into this, what I now believe to be a paranoid schizophrenic rant about the sex parties we, the students, had. And she started talking about the things she said, guys, it was unbelievable. And when I was like, she was back and forth and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just going to tell you thank you and take my leave. Yeah. And I did that. And when I so that was 2011. And when I got to Mysore that December, because I was going to do my first time in Mysore was in January of 2012. And when I got there and I saw the people whom I studied with who knew her, I said, did you know about this lady? And the two of them, the guilt on their faces. And I was just like, you knew something was off? What's the deal? And we didn't want to say bad things. So this is why I come back to the point about having an uncomfortable conversation, because they could have saved me some cash. One, and they could have, mind you, what Russell says is true, because I definitely got thrown into the deep end, and I learned how to teach and how not to teach. And I learned how to speak for myself and how to take control of a room and how to do what I had to do in those days, and how to find my teacher's voice, right? That's not something that necessarily would have happened as quickly if I hadn't had that experience. But geez, let me tell you, I was not thrilled. So when I was like, you guys, why aren't we having honest conversations? And then when I asked about her in Mysore, word around this, this is all gossip, and again, but we're a community because we're human, right? Was that she was the kind of lady who would get up for her practice at 1 o'clock in the morning and sit outside the gates and wait for 3 hours.
Yeah, one of those.
One of those super intense. Somebody else had said that another teacher had said that she had done pranayama too soon and gotten into it too deeply. And that was the reason why. What I thought was that here we have a situation where somebody is teaching I don't even know if she was on the authorized list at the time, because it wasn't something that I was looking at. I know she isn't there now, but I don't know if she was at the time. And I think she may have gotten authorization and then lost it because of just her behavior became erratic afterwards. But no, we don't have a way to keep students safe, because we're not having the uncomfortable conversations and we're not calling things out.
Yeah. I think too, on a macro level, is the lack of institutional standards.
Yeah.
That you in the Iyengar practice, you have these schools that have standards and rubrics, and it's replicable. And the problem with Pattabhi Jois and his lineage holder Sharat is that we didn't establish those.
Nope.
We didn't establish secondary universities. Like there wasn't a school in New York or where Sharat or Pattabhi Jois had established how to teach Ashtanga Yoga. People like, say, Kino would be an officer of Ashtanga Yoga,
right?
Established.
And if you wanted to study with them here, correct, she could then say, I can authorize to this level and that level, and you have to have shown this ability in teaching, this ability in your own practice, this understanding of the sutras, this understanding of anatomy, blah blah blah. And I had studied with. From Kino, I learned such tremendous kindness and strength in the practice as a woman, and studied with her and assisted her in Tim and that kind of thing. And so that's the level of kind of I was expecting. And so other than Mysore being so lonely, it felt so unstructured,
chaotic.
Yeah.
Whereas you can go to Oakland, California, and when I was coming up out of Austin, we were working on kind of David Swenson's circle. I had a friend who said, I really want to do something more structured. I'm going to go study at the Iyengar Institute in Oakland. It's a 3-year program. It's like a real university. And if you can't get to Pune because there was a 10-year waiting list or something, then something, maybe it was only...
This is your second best thing. No, but still, a lot
you can go
in 5 years.
And I feel like in Mysore, what they did is they just kept expanding the room to pack as many people in as possible, rather than creating rubrics and standards that you could replicate.
For sure. And what that led to is, rather than community, competition. Because now what we had, and this is something that I noticed, and it was, when I say Mysore was lonely, it was lonely, I would say, not the whole time, because after a while I became friends with people and I was looking forward to meeting up with friends every time we planned as girlfriends to meet up and that kind of thing. But I remember so us tallies at the back of it, right? Trying to make sure that we get our spaces at the back. And particularly for lead class, I'll never forget this. Walking into the double doors, into the shala, and a dude with his mat like a javelin threw his mat over my shoulder to land it. No, I'm not. I'm not joking.
You're not.
I think I was there that day.
You're not to do that.
We
No,
were just, and none of us were having it. We just kicked that mat out of the way because nobody was taking on that foolishness. So
that's not cricket.
yeah, that's not
No.
okay. And then it was competition for Sharat's attention. And it
Yeah.
was, and I think that's a lot to put on him. And I don't know what he must have felt like having this, being the steward of this lineage with 300 people or hundreds, in any 300 to 500 people in any season coming through, everyone trying to get some attention, everyone trying to see if I can get him to just notice me a little bit more. There was a dude who came, I'll never forget. He used to wear a Superman t-shirt. Anybody, ask anyone who knows.
Oh, and they call him Superman. He's a German dude.
No, this guy was American. This is a different dude. This guy was American. And
You're right. I remember.
Okay. And this guy, obviously had a very advanced practice. And I think Sharat and I have stopped him at Karanda. Dude decided he was going to go past and do up to Nakrasana.
Yeah.
And do you remember?
Yeah, he started.
And it was a thing. Yes,
yeah.
It was a thing because Sharat ripped him a new one. And it was like, why would you do that? Apparently it was so bad that he had to go to his teacher, went to him and was like, you need to go and apologize to Sharat for that. You don't do that in this space. But it's that kind of behavior. That's the kind of stuff we saw. And outside of that, you noticed people didn't see you as, here's an opportunity to make a friend from a different country, with a different culture, who has a different sense of the world. Now, for people like me who didn't see a lot of faces that were like mine sort of became lonely because every other person is looking at you like competition. Like, you're going to compete with me for eye time with Sharat. And I'm just like, I'm just here to learn, Star, that, this isn't, why are we making it this big deal? And it became this big deal. And I think to me, the peak of when I was just like, okay, something is wrong here, is Guru Purnima in 2018. This was my favorite trip to India because I had decided it was going to be, and it was the second trip since I'd gotten together with my husband. The first trip, I had missed him so much that I spent a lot of time mentally back in Jamaica while I was physically in India. But on this 2018 trip, we had since gotten married, and I had gone through some health challenges and come out the other side and felt like strong in my marriage. And he was just like, I'm so excited for you to go and have a good time. And I'm just like, I'm going to go, I'm going to crush it. And I was excited about going this time. And I arrived in Mysore. I was going to be there it was the time when he taught June, July, August, which is rare. And I was going to be there for all of August. And I had gone early and was able to make it there for Guru Purnima, which was really cool. And I was excited to be a part of it. And but it just became, who can give Sharat the biggest garland? And I'm just like, where is
I can give you this little flower. This is what I can give you.
Yeah. And I'm just like, but that's not what matters. We're here because we want to learn. And we're here because we want to share something special. We've been touched by this thing that has made me feel. I remember the moment that I felt 10 years prior, in 2008, the very first time I heard Pattabhi Jois's voice. I had gone, this is just before it's 2008. Yes, because he died in May of 2009. And this was the last trip he made to the US. And it was a whole bunch of us in that huge gymnasium in South Florida. And I had gone, a girlfriend of mine, bless her heart, I will love her forever, we got up early in the morning, and she drove me down from Fort Lauderdale all the way down to the Keys and sat in her car so that I could take this one class, because I needed to see Pattabhi Jois once in my life. And that was the first, and I introduced myself to Kino that day, and I remember hearing Pattabhi Jois call the opening mantra, and I was like, I am where I belong. This is where I belong. So 10 years later, watching his grandson trying to manage all these people just throwing, and I was just like, oh Lord, something is wrong here, because we're not doing this for the right reasons. And maybe I'm being unkind to them. And if I am, I hope that they can give me grace on this one. But I remember thinking, this is just, who can show Sharat they like, that they care the most. And I'm like, yeah, but That's not what we're here for. And I think that if we had more of that sense of structure, you have to do this for your year one. You have to do this for your year two. You have to do this amount of chanting with Lakshmi. How many people blew off Lakshmi's chanting classes? Because only the asana mattered. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I went to every single one, and I'm not putting myself on as something special, but that was a part of the class. That's why I was there, to take in the whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think like when Patabi Joyce started teaching, it was such a smaller group of students that were there. And so it was much more, even my first year there, your first year there, we all knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
There was no one that we didn't know,
Right.
because there was like
people.
40 people.
Right.
Yeah. It was like manageable to
Mm-hmm.
have kind of this loose structure,
Yeah.
conference once a week.
Yes.
And students would go and learn chanting or Sanskrit or philosophy and study with other teachers.
Yeah.
There was no internet. There was nothing to do all day.
Nope.
I mean, there was an internet, but like you had to go, no one had a personal computer or a
Dial
cell
up
phone,
and
right?
wait at these cyber cafes with these big computers. That's what we had.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's what Sharat kind of grew up in.
Yes.
And bless him, I don't think he had a great mind for
How to
creating
expand it and
structure
structure it.
and how to expand it. Yeah. And unfortunately, I feel like it was such a insular kind of family business that he was not comfortable with reaching outside for additional support and
Right.
taking that on
Right.
as advisors.
Right.
And so it just followed in this chaotic, haphazard type of personality at the end of the day,
Yeah. And
without
then,
any real, guidelines.
And what we've had, what we're experiencing now is the worst case scenario of what happens, right?
Yeah.
When we don't have the person at the top. And I'm not calling it a pyramid scheme in any way, shape, or form, but you've got him at the top. You have a couple of trusted, close students like yourselves. You're more certified people. Some of us, then you have, so there's fewer certified people than there are level 2, and there's fewer level 2 than there are level 1. And then there's a whole bunch of students who haven't yet, or who want to get up that ladder, right? So you have that. And so there is that sort of situation where you end up not feeling, again, like a community, because it's sort of haphazard, because we haven't had that sense of structure the way we want it. I feel for him, and universe rest his soul. I really wish we had that level of structure to then say, because what an amazing method. And when we can apply it, particularly the way I've started to teach it and feel my way through it with injury and chronic pain and the things I'm going through personally, then I kind of feel like here is the ultimate way you can customize this practice to fit someone's body, so that you don't have a whole bunch of people feeling like, crap, I'm stuck in Marichas in a sea, I'm never going to get past that, and I'm not as much as value as if somebody who can stand up from a drop bank. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the shadow side of it, for sure, is that you start to attach your value on the progression of the postures and your ability to perform.
Yes.
And it turns into like a little monster.
Yes. And Sharat
when yoga is really about healing, right?
Yes.
It's really about healing and connecting with
yourself,
your true self, your higher self, like embodiment, all of these beautiful things. And it starts to put the emphasis on that you might as well stay an accountant at a corporate job if that's
the case. So now I sort of feel like part of me appreciates the linear structure in which it's taught. The other part of me wonders if we have sort of cut people off to where their natural bodies might be able to. So for example, Kino was super kind to me in that she let me practice up until, I believe, Bekasana, before I could stand up from a drop back. And it was the strengthening of those back bends, those anti-gravity, what I teach called the anti-gravity back bends, that allowed me to develop the strength to be able to stand up consistently and drop back. So, some people don't need that. Other people do. And if we say that it can only be one way, that's like saying there can only be one God. And that is in itself a minefield. So now it can only be this one way.
The problem is right there in your limbs. It's so dead obvious. You have long limbs. And if you're a 5-foot Japanese girl who's not designed for length, then how can the two of you progress in the
In the
same
same
manner?
way, exactly. I remember watching people. I remember studying with Peg, I think it was Peg. And Peg was
Peg
like,
Mulqueen.
yes. She was like, your legs are long, but Shakira, your arms are even longer than your legs. So when you're working on dropping back and this kind of stuff, oh, no wonder you're terrified to drop back because the floor is so far. The way that you approach the practice must be different. You know what I mean? And it was like all these lights going off in my head. And I would love to see in a room people being able to kind of, I'm not, I don't have issues with props other people do, right? I don't have issues if you need a chair to do your asana practice. I feel like if you are there and you are listening, Sharat would say it in conference. He would say, this is not about doing fancy handstands, right?
Yeah.
But then the focus would be so asana forward. Then you'd be just like, where's the messaging because of that? I guess because of the lack of structure. Another side effect was now this mixed messaging that was coming out. And again, I have nothing but respect for Sharat. There's nothing that I thought of him that I thought, I liked being in his presence. I thought he was funny. He was a strict guy, but he was a funny guy. He had moments of humor, great. He could tell jokes. Particularly the moments where he was self-deprecating. I loved that. But now you're kind of like, it's important. Some of the most advanced yogis he knows only do sun salutations. Yeah, really? So then why is there all this push for, you must do this to do that. You must do that to do that. It felt like mixed messaging. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, some of the most advanced yogis I know don't even do sun salutations. How about that, right? I think that's the case. There was a cognitive dissonance that's implicit and inherent to the culture and to the system that Sharat himself actually had.
Yes.
And so as much as he says it's not about the asana, the actions, the behavior, the subconscious is all about the asana.
It's about the asana, for sure.
Yeah. And then you're in that environment, you also inherit that cognitive dissonance as a student.
Because you're there when you think about it, right? You're not there, as you said, even before or after internet, you're not there for anything else other than just for that hour and a half to 2 hours of practice every single day. So everything you think about is about the next day of practice. Am I going to get a new posture? I want to tell you, 3 years stuck in Kapotasana. Every day I was like, I am going to fail at Kapotasana because I'm terrified of Kapotasana and I'm stressing over Kapotasana. And it became its own self-fulfilling prophecy. It was when I said to myself, I'm not going to worry about it anymore. And I could just enjoy just the process. And it was not a pretty Kapotasana, but it was a done Kapotasana. And he was just like, you're going to do Supta Vajrasana. I was like, yes. So that and then I was so excited to go back, but then 2020 happened, and then 2021, and then 2020, I had to have surgery in 2022. And then, I won't be able to go back to study with him. What the future looks like, of what it looks like, particularly for somebody as me, because here I am, I'm the one person. In Jamaica, I was the only person in the Caribbean who was authorized to teach. And I'm the only person here in Pretoria who practices. I'm still in the process of doing my application for my permanent residency, so I can't legally teach here. So I have to go back home to Jamaica. That's why I've been back home twice since I've been living here, go back home to teach. So it's like making sure that I want to build a community here. I want to be a part of something here. But it's important to have that sense of structure and that sense of everybody goes through a particular thing. But at the same time, the teacher has enough mental flexibility to say, here is a person, particularly, so I teach in Jamaica, right? The body types in Jamaica, we're Black women and Black men, often with larger fleshier bodies. And so now I'm not going to give you a hard time if you're unable to do lotus because your legs are on the larger side. Fluffy girls deserve to do their yoga and enjoy themselves and have a good time and enjoy the practice and not feel like they're stuck because something's wrong with their body. And then the messaging, again, not again, as much as I respect Sharat, telling people that, too many chapatis and not enough coffee, I'm a person, you can't stop me from eating. As skinny as I am, I'm going to eat all the food everywhere. And I got to a point where I would go to India and people were like, are you going for yoga or are you going for the food? Because all I would do is post food pictures. But if you're somebody who struggles with an ED, for example, right?
Yeah.
And you hear that kind of messaging, I know
it's enormously true.
It's very, of course. And so those are the things we want to, it's about creating a standard. And I want to see Ashtanga have that going forward. I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that conversation about how Ashtanga doesn't have to be this rigid thing. I used to refer to Ashtanga as the ballet of asana, because of that level of this, that it has to be in this linear way that you have to do things. And I'm just like, but what if I just allow somebody to have an idea of what that feels like first? Or if you can see the connection between Parshvakonasana B and Marichasana C, one of the greatest things about teaching this method is finding the connections between things. When I started doing that, I was like, oh my gosh, the world just opened up. And now I could find another way to relate it to my students. And they'd be like, oh, that's cool. And that would be, and those are the things that we want to see in the space. If I could say something, and so if I can bring it back to my conversation about privilege, those of us in a position of privilege, because we all are to an extent, to be able to pick up and not work in your job for months at a time and go live in India. And, that's not an everyday experience. But with that, we can speak up about the way the conversation about Ashtanga should evolve. And we need to have those uncomfortable conversations to do that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think in my first trip, it was so dead obvious to me, immediately obvious to me, that it was about privilege.
What year was that?
2003. I would sit in Saraswati's house and I would watch Guruji's house because I didn't have a TV, and they did. And their TV had been given to them by a friend of mine, Mitchell, and I could watch the Australian Open from my apartment on Guruji's TV. And then Guruji would come down, and he had just been given a massive television, and I was homeless all last year, and I saved money by living in my university closet. But here I'm arrived, and someone else has given him a television, and someone else had given him like 15 diamonds in an Om shape on a necklace. So I'm not going to compete with this. And then I'm also observing these guys who have just massive Cirque du Soleil backbends. I'm not really competing at this level too. And just the enormous stacks of privilege that you had to take to be able to be somebody.
Yep.
It's really quite daunting, and I'm surprised that I kept doing it. I'm surprised I kept going back.
But I think there's another layer and level to that even, which is you just being able to go to Mysore to save that money to not work is more privilege than
somebody
millions of other people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that to me, it was never lost on me. And I felt, particularly as a woman of color, because one of the things that you hear, and I'm going to say, not just a woman of color, as a Black woman, because Black people don't do that. Black people don't do yoga. Black people don't do Ashtanga. The kind of messaging, what are you doing this thing for? Why? It comes back to why are you doing this yoga thing? And me stepping away from the societal expectations of where I'm from to do this thing that I needed to do because I just needed to follow what my heart was telling me I needed to do. And I never regretted a single time I was there. I remember David, if I remember his name, it's going to come to me. It's going to come to me. Yes, it is. Thank you. Good grief.
I remember David Gelano.
That was the name that kept coming into my head earlier.
I knew it was a G, and I knew it's not David Garrigue. And it was it's David Gelano. Thank you. David, when I got authorized, he was like, you've just made some good choices. And I'm like, and I had the privilege to make those good choices. I had good choices. Do you know what I mean? So he was really kind in what he said, but he also was able to shine a light on the privilege that it came with it. And I feel now like there's not a lot of people who look like me who do this. And that's me stepping out and trying to do this different thing because I needed to do this different thing. And I needed to find my heart center and to find what was inside. It's important for us to feel as if we are a part of that community and part of the voice. And so I remember Kino was writing a book. She in I think the most recent book that she's written, and she asked me if I would contribute a little blurb about, and it was
nice.
decolonizing your mat was what I wrote and what that meant. And to me, decolonizing your mat included having the uncomfortable conversations, because then there were the uncomfortable conversations about how students, particularly female students, were being treated at one point as well. And nobody wanted to talk about that. And then we have the conversations about how this person is more physically adept than that person, and these people are talking to these people, and that person has a bad reputation, and it's just, can we just?
It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. It's, oh my goodness. And then we can acknowledge that we can honor India as the birthplace of Ashtanga Yoga, and we can say there are things about that culture and that are problematic. And we can find the good in between the two things. We can say, here's an amazing teacher, but that he was also human. And so we don't need to put him on this pedestal where he does nothing wrong and says nothing wrong, because he's human, and human beings come with their own prejudices and their own issues. Every one of us has them. If we could have the conversations around bigger bodies and allowing people to not feel like it's just about being skinny and being conventionally attractive, specifically perhaps white, and in what Russell said before, male in terms of a voice of authority. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because once you have those levels, one thing I respect to the nth about Sharat was that he was very clear on, these are my students, that is my family. I loved that, because that was not going to brook any argument about, you were going through and you were hearing like what was happening in the Anusara world with John Friend, and you were hearing what was happening in the Iyengar world. You know, I could call names like Rodney Yee or the hot room guy, Bikram, like millions of stories of things that were not quite, you know what I mean? But like,
Very bad.
very bad behavior. But it's something that my husband always calls out. He was like, but there is something about the guru model, Shakira, that lends itself to that level of abuse. So we have to have conversations around that. I mean, I'm not afraid to have those uncomfortable conversations. We have to be able to speak to each other and say, this is what is wrong. For example, there's like a big WhatsApp chat that we have now for all the people. I know if you guys are in it, but I certainly am. And there's this huge WhatsApp chat. And there was a lot of, in the aftermath of Shrat's passing, which is devastating, right? People are pouring out their grief and pouring into different ways and sharing different things. And somebody goes on a podcast and says this thing, but they said they went on a podcast with somebody else, this person have a bad reputation, and then that person, and then the Instagram posts went off. And I was just like, what on earth is this? Because this is not what we're supposed to be doing in a time of loss. Yeah? We can disagree now. Absolutely. You can say to me, Shakira, you cannot do Bakasana B until you do Kapotasana. I can say to you, Harmony, I completely disagree. And we can have those conversations and we can hash out the why. But what we're not going to do is get ad hominem. Yeah. And what we're not going to do is attack each other in a space where we need to have constructive communication around how to move forward. If that will happen,
that's one thing concerns me about, like, when we talk about having these more systematized, Ashtanga yoga structures or
standards,
councils or standards of learning or different things, because it is so physically based, because it is so asana based. At the essence of the practice, we all know that's really what it is, right? Is like success and achievement through manipulating your body to make a shape, right? And there's, again, inherent in it, as you've spoken to, like ableism. There's also featuring flexibility or strength or certain body types over other body
Others.
types. There's a sense of, if you don't lose weight, you're not going to progress or move on. So therefore, you're less of a yoga student or practitioner, even if you're not explicitly saying that to your students.
People are reading what's
Yeah.
coming off of your body. You're going to tell them, no, 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 eat everything you want. And then you turn around and you starve yourself because I couldn't bind in Pashasana yesterday.
Yeah, or your teacher says maybe you should try a cleanse, or maybe you should.
No, my liver
ride
does
the
that,
bike
thank
more.
you.
And like, it's just not possible. It's physically not possible for some people to do certain asanas.
For sure.
And that doesn't mean anything about them.
No, precisely.
Physically, emotionally, mentally,
Precisely.
spiritually, socially.
Exactly. And yet, that's what we've stacked value into it. That's what I talk about, decolonizing the mat and the intersections of that privilege and the identity and the responsibility. I feel like with the privilege of speaking out, if you have a wide platform, you can go to different countries and travel and talk to different groups of students. How you carry yourself, what you say, and how you treat yourself, not only on the mat but off it, is something, because your students are watching. My students are watching and they know. They're like, Shakira, you taking care of yourself the way you should be? Or I had a brief Mysore program between 2016 and 2020 because COVID. And I loved that. And we had like maybe 5 or 7 people coming in throughout the day. And it was lovely. 3 days a week. Come and do your half primary. Come do your full primary. Come do your first 2 poses of second if you could do them. And go about your business for the rest of the day. And I loved that because here we could be, it was like what you talked about in the beginning with Patabi Joyce, where it was just the 40 of you and everybody sort of knew everybody else. I had a woman come in who had, I will never forget this, she had been diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. She's since gone into remission. She's cured of it. Yay. But she had been wearing hats and scarves. And one day she was just like, I'm sick of this effing scarf. And she pulled it off and she was bald. And we were just like, girl, practice. My job is to hold the space for you to do this exploration.
Yeah.
Right? This thing is a lab.
Yeah.
This thing here is just a laboratory for you to explore who you are. My job is to keep you safe and give you guidelines and structure within this particular method. That's all. It's not supposed to become about me. It's supposed to be what I can help you figure out about yourself on the mat.
Yes. Totally.
It reminds me when I was in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco, and we were building an organization to help teach yoga to kids. There was this kind of concept going around called the learning organization, and that a lot of big companies often fail because they actually become cult of personalities, where the company is built around Steve Jobs.
Right.
The company is built around Bill Gates. How do you get your company to become, say, IBM or GMC?
Where it's about the brand as opposed to the person. Where it's about the reach.
We have no idea who the CEO of GMC is right now. We don't have any idea who the CEO of Toyota is.
Because it doesn't matter, because that's not what it's about. Yeah.
It's about the replication of process and being successful with that replication.
Yeah.
And I feel like we have this organization that is in free fall failure because it became a cult of personality. If there's anything that we can do going forward is to create something, as you said, that is accessible to everyone, regardless of body type. And then it's a marketplace. So how accessible is it to people who live in underserved
communities?
Neighborhoods?
Yeah. And that was another thing that I wanted to talk about with the decolonizing your mat. Often it's communities that people who can benefit from it so much, communities of color, but communities that don't have financial privileges, people who live in certain food deserts and that kind of thing, for example. I mean, what was happening to me was I had gotten to a point where I have to decide, what can I afford to do? And I was one of the lucky ones where at one point, my husband, he was working for a company in Jamaica where part of his salary package was a fully maintained car and rent. So largely we could just bank everything that I earned in Jamaica and everything he earned in Jamaica. We just bank and bank and bank. And we were lucky. We were able to buy a house. We were able to buy property. We were able to do things with that. And that is tremendous privilege. And I could still have to go, okay, can I afford to do this? Much less somebody who might have children and be a single parent, or somebody who has parents that they have to care for, different kinds of cultures and different kinds of people with different kinds of family groups and different kinds of ways of living, who would need access to a method like this, that if I can just teach you the sun salutations and have you practice that at home, that's your practice. If I can just give you access to that, it doesn't have to be like, with my hip the way it is, I don't know if I can ever do the perfect Dvipada Shirshasana again.
Any of them.
Yeah. Or any of them. My right leg can still do it fine. I was very proud of that. But I that's not the point. It's just as important for the person who needs this touch point to a sense of finding peace within themselves. What my students come away from the class, what I hope my students come away from class when I teach them, when I've been home to teach, is that you had this opportunity to delve within yourself and figure out what is happening on the inside of you. And that isn't something that we in Ashtanga hold the license to, as it were. We don't. It's just another tool that we have.
Yeah.
So it's, if we can make it accessible, if we can have it be something, and accessible in a space where we as teachers can continue to live, because of course, thoughts and prayers don't pay bills. So there is it as well. No, let's be honest and clear. I still have to make a living, right? So I have to figure out things and ways and go home and, make enough money so that it makes sense for me to be here and wait while I'm going through the process, because I can't legally teach here and I'm not going to. So what am I going to do to figure things out and move through? And, it is... Man, what a beautiful method we are a part of. And yet it needs help. It needs structuring, and it needs honest conversations, and it needs accessibility, because the more of that we get is the more variety of viewpoints that we can share. And to me, that can only benefit the practice. And I think what happens is that people think, here's what I think the fear is that people are going to go from the devil to the deep blue sea. That's not what people are asking for. People want to know that if it's not super strictly this thing. Let me give you an example of what I've seen people post. I saw this post up to today. There is a guy who said, when you come to my class, you can't just do whatever you want. There's this idea that if it's not this strict thing, you're gonna just take it and just go and do anything and just sit down and no, people.
Like someone's going to show up and start doing CrossFit in the
middle of the class. No, that's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is that if harmony is having, okay, what about when a woman is on her cycle? What does your practice feel like then? And you don't want to take those 3 days of ladies' holiday off. Maybe you benefit from moving during that time more than you don't. I have gotten into trail running since I've been living here in South Africa. And so now I have to work on, I've always been somebody, you could bend me in half. I came into the practice being able to do Supta Kurmasana so easily. That's why the back bends were so hard, because my posterior chain was so stretchy and weak. But yet, so I started running and all those things have started to tighten. So now I've got to shift my practice so that I can support those things, so that I can functionally move, so that not only the pretty pose. Today I was practicing with my girlfriend from London. We do it online. And I hate Nakrasana. And I was working on Nakrasana today and I wasn't thinking about it. And I was talking to her about something while I was doing it. And I was like, oh, wow, that's the easiest Nakrasana I've ever done. Because now I can get out of my head and just focus on my breath and just stay in the body. And I didn't do Dhanurasana today because I've got painful scar tissue but I'm not less of a yogi than you are because you can do all of third. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We cannot do all of third.
I've retired my third, but yeah. Except for the first posture,
Yes,
first couple postures.
Is it?
Maybe the first 3.
Is it for real?
None of it.
Yeah.
I really let go. I recognized all of these things, all of these implicit hang-ups, and the value that we attribute to ourselves based on the asana, and even the value that other people attribute to you based on the asana. And there was something in me that said, in order to clear all of that bullshit, which it really is, you got to let it go, because it's not clear if you're still reinforcing the pattern.
Yes, I love that.
And so in order to clear it, you actually have to really release it and then deal with all of the
That
emotional,
comes up.
internal shadow work that comes up
Yeah.
around who am I?
Yeah.
What is my value? Am I worthy?
Yep.
What does this mean? All those deeper questions. And now I've started to kind of add in a few little things here and there, but I had to really let it all go, because it wasn't going to clear by me continuing the pattern.
I agree. So I have a question
know?
for you. I mean, even though I'm the one being interviewed today, but because the two of you are yoga practitioners and a married couple, right?
Yeah.
My husband isn't a yogi. He came to yoga classes. How we met was I was teaching corporate yoga, teaching at the place where he worked. And so he would pitch up, and he was one of the few men who would come to a class. And then we became friends, and then friends became more. But he is sort of I can very much tend to be I'm very much Vata, and I'm very much in the air and dreaming, woohoo. And he is my earth. My husband is the most kapha person, you and me, and he sort of grounds me. When you, as a couple, you're going through dealing with having to let go things and when I've had those misgivings about the practice, he was always there as a non-practitioner to kind of give me that, here's my non-practitioner. You guys, you yoga people need to get your heads out of your asses with respect to this. You know what I mean? How do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you hold each other accountable in that way as both who have been in the world?
Yeah. I don't know. That's a great question. I feel like our personality, because Russell has like a whole other life outside of yoga. And I also have other interests outside of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like we balance each other with different perspectives. Yeah. And like we don't really practice together very much.
We don't practice together very much.
Right.
You've asked me to go to classes with you. I was like, I don't want to go to these California vinyasa flow bullshit things. And I
like them.
I do a little thing that I like to do to stretch my hamstrings and my back, and my hips. Like, I can't do any of third, but I can do a lot of fourth. Right. So it's just weird.
Interesting.
It's weird. It's just in my hips to do.
Right.
And again, it really does come down to identity. Mm-hmm. Is that we shook off identifying as Ashtangis and Ashtanga yoga teachers as the primary. And I felt like when I left Stanford to come to Canada, I had retired as a yoga teacher, and I would help Harmony out. And even when I'm in the room, sometimes if she's invited me to come to California or to Sweden, I still feel competitive with her. So I also have a viewpoint that has value, and I'm going to assert myself.
We're humans, we have egos, yeah.
I have an enormously ego, but really I'm a painter, and I work for my family business, and that's really my place.
Mm-hmm. But so there's like a shift that happens, I think, when you stop making the practice the most important thing in your life, and you really are able to do that, not just like, practice isn't the most important thing in your life, and you're still like prioritizing it as the number one thing on your priority list.
Yes.
And I think for me, like having my son, there's a lot of different steps in there. Like different things kind of.
Your dogs.
Yeah. I don't know. It got displaced for various reasons. Good. And I also displaced it because I couldn't just keep being in that cycle of like, I got to do this thing. I should be doing this thing. I should be doing more of this thing. Like, that's not a healthy cycle to be in.
And what you make me think of is something that is going to connect back to the whole idea of identity again, because I feel like If we spend so much time focusing on this physical thing and not commenting on like the real world issues, what ends up happening is that we're going to this bubble, right? And we're in the yoga bubble and this love and light bubble that pisses me off. This, and where we sort of gaslight and we sort of spiritually bypass the uncomfortable conversations, because we go, I don't really want to have that conversation, but because I really don't want to have to change. Have you ever seen this cartoon that goes, it's a 2-panel cartoon, and it's this man speaking to a group of people, and he goes, who wants change? And everybody goes, who wants to change? And nobody raises their hand. Right?
That's a good one.
It's a good one, and you take that into context. I'm not gonna pick out a particular political ideology, because you could apply this to anyone. And I mean, there's some obvious extreme ones we won't get into, but like the way that we talk about the world and how we talk about helping each other, and we talk about calling out injustice and bigotry and all the isms that come with that. And I live in a country that's loaded with it. Never have I been so aware of race as I have these last 3 years, because even in
South Africa.
even 30 odd years after the official end of apartheid, the legacy lives on in so many different ways here, and it plays itself out. And you may not know this about me, but my husband is Afrikaans. And an Afrikaans man with a Black woman. So like it is how I've had to navigate friendships and people where I feel safe, whom I can speak to, how people see me, because they may not see me the way that they see their fellow South Africans. You know what I mean? I'm a foreigner, and so they can look at it in a different way. But we have been given this tool. We've been given these sutras. We've been given these amazing tools to discern, right? Even the iconography of Patanjali is about discernment. Think of that sword that he holds, right? It's in the opening mantra, and we just bypass it, and we give it lip service, and we just do the physical pose, and then we congratulate ourselves, we pat ourselves on the back, and then we walk away, but people are going hungry. And it just, it doesn't work for me anymore. It can't work. Like and I'm not saying that like I'm Mother Teresa, who is, she had her issues, but I'm not saying that like I'm the best person on the planet and that I have all the answers. I don't, absolutely not. But I think the reason we practice the asana practice is about going deeper inside. And that depth is to confront the things about you and to arrive at a different level of self-awareness. If we're not doing that, then we're wasting our time. The asanas mean nothing.
It's true. I couldn't agree more. And I think sometimes we mistake the tool for the goal. And I think that happens a lot in our practice. It gets in the way too. It's like a city, I think when you're really in the Ashtanga Yoga sequence and system and you're doing all the right things, it does evoke kind of like a city. And Patanjali talks about how these cities, these magic powers, become obstacles themselves.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you become attached to the magic of floating back and floating forward and handstanding and back bending and grabbing your thighs and standing on one leg and standing on your head and, all the things, and you get so attached to that and so identified with it, and it becomes so important to you, then now you've taken the tool that's supposed to help you find self-realization and freedom.
And replace that self-realization with it. Yes.
Yeah.
Because like for me, how have we gone? Like the pipelines, like again, not trying to point at political ideology, but how did the yoga to conspiracy theory pipeline develop? Like how are we looking, namaste, but these people deserve to die? Like how are we having these conversations? It doesn't make sense. So I feel like, I specifically walked away from religious belief and organized religion, which is a hard thing to do. I carry that as a West Indian, as a Caribbean person who, we cling to the cross so much in the Caribbean. And for me, it didn't make sense to me anymore. And it wasn't right for me as an ethical set of practices anymore. And it was just reading the Bible and then just telling people how to live their lives rather than kind of really looking, There's a Bible verse that says, do not pluck the sawdust out of your brother's eye without looking at the big plank in your own, right? I needed to step away. In the same way that you say you had to step away from the identity, I had to step away from the identity of Christian and the identity of believer, because I didn't believe anymore. And I just don't have that faith. But I have a belief that humanity can, if educated, if well fed, if cared for, if honored and allowed to give rise to diversity and inclusion and equity, because it matters. I'm not trying to make a DEI ad, but those are the things. There's so much that we can learn about each other and learn from. And that's what I think can expand and make all of our practices so much better. I think I want to open when I can. I'm in the process of like writing up my business plan for what I want, what I'd like to see, and what I'd like to teach here. And what I want to do is to have this space where you can come and practice, and your practice doesn't have to look like Harmony's practice or Russell's practice or Kino's practice or Maruga's practice. And neither does that necessarily have to be aspirational. Those are, let me make it be clear, beautiful, beautiful practices, amazing people, kind and scholarly and knowledgeable in so many different ways. But their practice is their own. My practice is my own. My practice can never be Laruga's. It can never be yours. All of us are different. Kino's practice can never be Tim's. Tim's practice could never be Sharat's. Nobody's practice can be Hamish or Peter Sanson or David Swenson. We are unique and individual in the way that we approach and go through. And we go through stages in our bodies. Where I am today is where Tim Miller was 30 odd years ago. We don't have this, we can't have the same ideas towards the practice. And each of those ideas should be allowed. Okay, here's the structure that Russell says that we should have, but within that structure, we can have a bit of freedom to teach and to share. That's what I want to see. That is what I want to see.
Love it.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time.
I know.
I really want to thank you for taking this time to talk with us. I saw your little note on my Instagram and I thought, I'd love to talk with her. I'd love to get to know you better and hear your voice. And
tell us what you're doing. If people want to connect with you and work with you, how can they do that?
So like I said, I can only right now do stuff online. So I'm available to do that. People can reach out to me on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is Kira Sadhana, Kira, for the last four letters of my name, and then Sadhana behind that, Sadhana. That's my threads. I do threads and I do Instagram. And then you can write me at kirasadhana@gmail.com if someone is interested in having a conversation or talking more about this sort of stuff, intersections of privilege and Blackness, Black women experiencing Ashtanga and going through this stuff and all the ideas I have in my head. That's where you can find me. And I just want to be a part of this community, and I want to see it enriched, and I want to see it rise from the ashes, because I love it so much, and it saved my life in so many different ways and made me a better person. And I want to see other people have the benefit of that too.
100%. It's so powerful.
It is.
thank you.
Thank you
so
guys.
much. So wonderful. That was just so amazing. What a fun conversation. I learned so much, and I hope you did too. If you would love to go deeper and take your practice off your yoga mat and into your life, into the world, starting to learn more about pranayama, developing a regular practice, chanting, tuning into the vibrations and the Sanskrit mantras, as well as looking at some of the more esoteric philosophical concepts, come on in to my Inner Circle mentorship. This is a private community that's online. I offer weekly Mysore classes in addition to these monthly workshops and special programs. And you can find out all the information when you join the Finding Harmony community. Head on over to community-harmonyslater.com. Join the community and come on into my Inner Circle mentorship. I would love for you to be a part of this beautiful space and start growing into the full richness of this yoga practice together with me. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.